Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I am your host, Matt Giraldi, doing a solo episode today out in Germany. Kind of tough with the time change sometimes, so we're going to be doing a few solo episodes here and there. Today, we're going to be walking through five rookies that I'm going to be targeting very heavily for the upcoming year. Wanted to choose guys that were drafted outside of the first round. Rookies have always been a big part of my strategy. So if you're in my home league and you're watching this episode, please go ahead and turn it off. This is not for you because I do not want you taking guys that I'm going after. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Cool. So the first guy kind of hits close to home, big Chargers fan. It's going to be McConkey. So I don't really know what New England was doing when they traded down with the Chargers to give up on McConkey. They had just taken their hopefully next franchise QB in the first round. He was sitting in their laps. They needed a reliable receiver, but Patriots kind of do what they did and traded down, and Chargers went up and got their guy. So could not be more excited for Ladd to join Justin Herbert in the new regime under Harbaugh. Looking at the team holistically, upgraded the O-line, which was huge, brought in Jim Harbaugh, which was huge, hired Greg Roman, you name it, just across the board. But, on the tougher side, losing Keenan Allen and Mike Williams is going to definitely be a tough pill to swallow. So those guys were studs for us for a very long time. Keenan last year was averaging 11 and a half targets per game alone. So really was kind of that PPR machine and, got hurt toward the end of the season, which was really unfortunate. But sad to see these guys go, but excited for someone new like Ladd to come in. And right now, you can make the argument, and I'm actually going to make the argument that he's already the best wide receiver on the team. You look at Josh Palmer, we kind of know what he is. He's kind of more of a number 3, maybe a number 2. We've seen him be pushed up to number 1 kind of over the years when Allen and Williams have gotten hurt. He's fine. That's totally fine. Quentin Johnston, their first round wide receiver last year, hopefully will not be a complete and total bust. Hopefully the new regime can learn to really work with him and play to his strengths. Wasn't a huge fan of him coming out of college, but obviously they should have drafted Jordan Addison last year. But I digress. And, reports early on with Justin Herbert are very solid with Ladd McConkey. So I would expect him to really be that number 1 featured offense on this team. And, I know a lot of the narrative is with Jim Harbaugh is just going to want to run the ball. That's all they're going to do. Yes, their identity is changing, but think of it from a sense that they're going to be much more efficient all the way around. So Herbert's not going to have to force the ball. They're going to have a very good team rolling down the field. I think that, Ladd's one of those guys that, the potential to be Herbert's number 1 target is too much of an upside to pass. And right now it is ADP, wide receiver 46. He's going between some very solid players. Obviously, Tyler Lockett's been doing his thing for a long time, and I feel like, every year we're kind of quick to write him off. But, this year we'll probably see JSN take a step forward. We know DK is going to be that X receiver. And then with Rome Odunze, there's a chance he could be the number 1 for Caleb Williams, but there's also a chance he could be the number 3 on that team. So, I'd rather go after someone like Ladd, who is probably going to be the number 1 right away. And when you look at his skill set, I mean, his footwork, his route running is just elite. He's able to find those soft spots in the defense. But not only that, he's not just that check down guy. His quick burst is unbelievable. He's got 4.39 speed. I mean, just watch the play in the Orange Bowl against Florida State. They threw him a screen on the 30-yard line. He was supposed to throw it to another guy. Play broke. He just jetted off into the end zone against what was supposed to be a very good Florida State defense. So this guy is just a highlight reel waiting to happen. Cannot wait to draft him. I know he's kind of getting thrown into that slot role, but we're going to see him play on the outside as well. We're really not going to see him come off the field that much. He played over 70% of his snaps on the outside of Georgia. I know college is different, but the SEC in Georgia is probably the closest thing you can get to the NFL at this point, just seeing the guys that have come off, that team and the SEC as a whole their last 10 years. But yeah, really excited to draft Ladd McConkey. Next guy I'm very excited about as well is Keon Coleman. So he Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis are gone, and that's 240 targets that are vacated from last year. We know they brought in Curtis Samuel. We know, Khalil Shakir is going to get some hype. We've seen Dalton Kincaid, jump up in ADP, but I think there's a lot to be said about Josh Allen really targeting Keon Coleman, pre-draft. So he texted him, the day before or the day of round two, said, "Hey, you're the guy I want. I told Buffalo to go draft you." That can't be understated. And when you look at, Keon Coleman, the way he's already acclimated onto that team, he's becoming a super popular figure in the locker room with the fans, with the media, just a great personality. And I can't wait to see, what he can do on the field. And looking at his performance on the field, he was playing at Michigan State before, transferring to Florida State, where he also played basketball at Michigan State, which I think is one of the most impressive things, I can think of. It's not just some, random FCS school. It's one of the bluest of the blue bloods. And while he was playing basketball, he also outperformed Jaden Reed at the same team at Michigan State. So take with that as you will. Had a very, very poor 40 time this year at the NFL draft, which really pushed him down the draft boards. But then what we saw was with his gauntlet drill, he actually had the fastest gauntlet time. And if you can think back to last year, that was very similar to Puka Nacua. And you're going to hear all of these, who's the next Puka? Who's the next Puka? Maybe that person isn't in this year's draft class just because Puka was a 5th round target. But if you're looking for a similar pattern, I think that's something that you can look very closely to. And again, like I said with Ladd McConkey, the potential to be Allen's number one target is such a huge upside. And an ADP of wide receiver 53, I think that's just something I'm going to take a shot at. He's between guys like Mike Williams, Jacoby Myers, and I guess just a quick side bit on Jacoby Myers. Like, he finished wide receiver 24 last year. He's finished wide receiver inside the top 30 the year before, missing 4 games. He might be the most grossly underrated fantasy producer year over year that no one really seems to care about. So side note, don't draft Mike Williams, but do think about Jacoby Myers, but absolutely think about Keon Coleman. I think, the sky's the limit with this guy. Speaking of guys that are potential number ones for big receivers, and someone we'll touch on at the end, and the notables is, Marvin Harrison Jr. And right now he's being drafted as really a top 10 wide receiver on the back of, hey, he's going to be Kyler's number one target. But if you can get Josh Allen's potential number one target at wide receiver 53, and that hits, we're talking about a league winning guy. So jumping over to the running back position, Jonathon Brooks, he was the first running back taken in the NFL draft out of Texas, had an unfortunate ACL tear last November. He's battling back from that, coming back from injury, putting in all the work, probably not going to be a starter right out of the get-go, and maybe he will, and it'll take some time to get acclimated. But, this guy really has it all, and he could have been, a potential first-round running back had it not been for injury, and had it not been for the way that running backs are, viewed and drafted this day and age. But, he's got all the talent in the world. And, from a personality-wise and from a team standing, he didn't transfer out of Texas when he easily could have. He sat behind Bijan Robinson, played the backup role, had some good games during that role, and then he really took over once Bijan entered the NFL until his unfortunate injury. So I really think the sky's the limit for Jonathon Brooks. Now, we saw Dave Canales join the team as the head coach. He was the OC over at Tampa Bay. And what did we see last year out of Tampa Bay? Canales just riding that number one back. Rashad Wright was just getting peppered targets and runs all the time, and he was so good for where he was being drafted last year that I think once Brooks is back and healthy, he's going to really get that role. And right now, his ADP is kind of priced into that, because at running back 32, that's as many teams as the NFL. Carolina is projected to be probably one of the worst, if not the worst teams in the NFL, between guys like Devin Singletary and Tyjae Spears. So you do have to kind of pay to play with this one, and he's actually being drafted 11 spots higher than Chuba Hubbard. right now, who's the presumed starter. Again, health aside, but I think if you want to spin this offense in positive light, a lot of people are really fading Panthers based on last season's performance for good reason. So they brought in a new head coach. They added weapons like Xavier Leggett, Jonathon Brooks, Deontay Johnson, who can just get open like it's nobody's business. And Bryce Young was the number one pick last year. And let's not pretend that he wasn't more or less the consensus number one overall pick. I know I had CJ Stroud ahead of Bryce Young, but I still had Bryce Young number two. Even the haters had him, higher than no lower than number 2 or 3. So you're kind of getting a built-in discount with all Carolina players. So, I'm going to be drafting Jonathon Brooks a lot, but I'm also going to be taking a lot of Deontay Johnson. And even in Superflex, maybe looking at Bryce Young as kind of a third or even fourth quarterback. But, Brooks is definitely a guy that you might have to be patient with, and you're going to have to pay at that ADP, but I think someone in the long run that can really be a positive. Sorry, there's a robot lawnmower that's cutting the grass right next to me. Second running back on this list, Trey Benson, 3rd-round pick, Arizona Cardinals. This guy just profiles is just absolute workhorse with size and speed. He checks every box that you could want from a franchise running back, athletic freak, 98th percentile athletic score, broke PFF single season college record by forcing 0.51 missed tackles per rush. Anytime you're setting records over like a 10-year period or whenever PFF was inaugurated or initiated, that's just something that can't be. And, James Conner is the lead back on this team. He's probably one of the more underrated players in the NFL, in my opinion, but he's 29 years old. He's averaged 4 missed games over the last 5 years. He's coming off the second highest workload of his career. There's just a lot that could potentially go wrong, but I'm not drafting Trey Benson as a handcuff. I'm looking at this guy at RB40 between Chase Brown and Zach Charbonnet, who I think Charbonnet is more of a handcuff. And I think Chase Brown is, I know a lot of people are going to talk him up, kind of that lightning in a bottle, quick change of pace type guy, but I'm not so sure I'm sold on that. I'm drafting Trey Benson as sit on my bench for the first 6 weeks and be patient, because whether it's an injury or whether it's just him getting his shot and taking over, this is the type of guy that we hear this every year. League winner. And we all look at ourselves, on waivers saying, oh, that guy's not there. Why wasn't he picked? Why isn't he there? Because you should draft him and keep him on your bench and be patient. So when you're constructing your rosters and you're doing mock drafts, I truly think this is the type of guy that even if Connor stays healthy, can take over that role and be that number one on an offense that's going to be drastically improved with the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr., Kyler Murray back and healthy. We've seen how awesome Trey McBride can be. I really think that this team is going to be better than maybe people think. And I think Trey Benson is going to be a big part of that. Last but not least, Blake Corum, Los Angeles Rams. Just an absolutely amazing college career. 61 career touchdowns over 53 games at Michigan, finished as the national champion, one of Harbaugh's favorite players, hard worker, locker room guy, all the intangibles that coaches love. Not the biggest, not the fastest, but just a true, very good, solid running. Excellent footwork, excellent vision behind the line of scrimmage. He just plays stronger and bigger than he is, faster than he is. I'm telling you, this guy can easily take over as the Rams' number one back. Everyone is falling in love with Kyren Williams. They're drafting him as high as the early 2nd round. I've seen him go in the 1st round in some drafts. I just cannot get behind that. I have 0 Kyren Williams, his current ADP. We saw him take over last year. We saw how good he was given his opportunity, and I think that was just awesome. But let's not pretend that he was this high-profile guy that's young and new and doesn't have an injury history. He was a 5th rounder a couple years ago, made the most of his opportunity. Not taking anything away from that, but let's just not pretend that Sean McVay is not going to ride the hot hand. If Blake Corum comes in, has an excellent drive, it looks the part, McVay's going to ride that guy. And, you know, say what you want about that, but I would much rather take a shot on Blake Corum at RB42 next to Antonio Gibson of the New England Patriots, who might be the worst team in the NFL. Not to mention, he's the backup running back behind Ramondre Stevenson, who is actually a very good player. Like, there's just no way that I'm not going to take Blake Corum in that position. And you're going to hear this all the time, handcuff guy, blah, 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 blah. But just like Trey Benson, I just think that Corum by the end of the year can take over, be the lead back. They're not invested heavily in Kyron. He's had 3 foot injuries over the last 2 years. I'm not predicting injury. I'm just being realistic here. All I'm going to say is take Blake Corum, be patient, all these guys that I'm talking about, and just trust me. Some honorable mentions here. Again, like I mentioned previously, wanted to stay away from, guys that were drafted in the first round, but I'll talk through each of these guys. Marvin Harrison Jr., he's someone that it's kind of almost like a generational type prospect going into a very, very good situation. I'm going to be drafting him in a decent amount of places. I've kind of recently moved him up over someone like Brandon Ayuk, but you really have to pay to play with this type of guy. I mean, it's going to be someone like an Ayuk, Devontae Adams, Chris Olave staring you in the face, or going with a rookie with Kyler Murray. And, my strategy has always kind of been to take rookies, so I'm not really that risk averse in this scenario, but he's being drafted not close to his ceiling necessarily, because he could finish, top 3s in his range of outcomes very easily, but got to pay to play with this one. And Malik Neighbors right now, he's someone that's kind of creeping up my board a little bit. He's kind of in that 25-ish range. Guys like Zay Flowers, Tank Dell, but man, every time you turn on the tape with Malik Neighbors, it's like, how the hell is this guy not in the first round of fantasy drafts? I mean, with Daniel Jones maybe not being as awful as he was last year, hopefully, and Neighbors being the focal point of that offense, especially now that Saquon's gone, I think he's someone that I'm going to be targeting quite a bit more. So really excited about him. He can score from anywhere on the field, and if he takes off, no one is going to be surprised about it. Another guy, Brock Bowers. I don't really know what to do with Brock Bowers, because he's one of those guys that I was really bummed that he went to the Raiders, not just because I'm a Chargers fan, but because they've got Devontae Adams, they've got Jacoby Myers, they want to run the ball, they don't have a great quarterback situation. Right now his ADP at tight end is like number 12. So, I might target him later in the draft if I've already picked up someone. If I wait and miss out on tight end, get like like a Jake Ferguson, or even like an Evan Ingram or something, and just see if Bowers takes off, because he's one of those guys where, we're not really seeing tight ends in the first round that often, outside of he and Kyle Pitts, I guess. But, he was the best player on Georgia's team his freshman year, the moment he stepped onto the field. So we're talking about a generational type talent. And if they orchestrate the offense more around him, and Devontae Adams, shows his age a little bit more, and he ends up as a top 5 tight end, no one's going to be like, oh my God, I didn't see that coming. So I still don't really know what to do with him, but very intriguing, but just don't love the situation. Brian Thomas Jr., the touchdown machine from LSU, playing alongside Malik Neighbors. God, what a duo that was. And what a duo for Jaden Daniels. I'm really excited to see Jaden Daniels this year. Kind of, I guess he's got a good receiver, so I can't take anything away from him. But his situation last year was pretty awesome. And Brian Thomas Jr., 6'3", 215, 4'3" guy, like just checks all the boxes. Again, really only let him off this list because I didn't want to target round 1 NFL draft picks, but he's definitely someone I'm going to be going after quite a bit. But Jacksonville is kind of weird. Like Trevor Lawrence, I think is kind of wildly overrated, but he's going to huck the ball a million times. So I'd rather just take someone like him now that, Calvin Ridley's gone, just put him in the flex spot and hope for that upside. Adonai Mitchell, I included him here because he's someone that probably could have easily and maybe should have been a first round wide receiver talent-wise, he is a top 10 potential pick. He's had some issues over the years, but I think he's actually going into a very good situation from his real life development standpoint. They've got Anthony Richardson, they've got Shane Steichen calling the plays, got Pittman there, they've got Josh Downs. Like, I don't think AD has to really be that guy right away, which, we saw a lot of mocks where he was going to KC, he was going to Buffalo, where maybe he would have been thrust in a situation where he wasn't quite ready. But I think this is going to be a really good one. And I don't think that he's someone I'm going to be going after from a fantasy perspective just because of the other guys that I've mentioned before. I think Alec Pierce is still going to be on the field quite a bit in the beginning of the year, but he's someone that over the next few years, just based on his talent, the way he moves, I mean, kind of looks like CeeDee Lamb sometimes, zagging up the field. But yeah, he's going to be someone that can hopefully be a very great NFL player and a steal for the Indianapolis Colts. And with that is the top 5 rookie prospects that I'm going to be going after for the upcoming fantasy season. Thanks, guys.